Welcome to Co-Parenting Champions with Dr. Celeste. I'm Dr. Celeste Simmons, forensic psychologist and strategic partner for family law issues. And this is the space where parents learn to shift their approach, build the life they actually want, and show up for their kids no matter what the other parent does. And if you're here and you're not a co parent, these strategies might still be useful for you because learning to focus on where you want to go instead of what you don't want, that changes everything in every relationship, including the one you have with yourself. Now, I know your time is valuable, so today we are doing a co parenting champion soundbite. That is practical strategies you can use right now in about 5 to 10 minutes. Quick reminder, I'm here to offer insights and ideas. How you apply them is completely up to you. This is not a substitute for mental health treatment, therapy, or any kind of legal advice. If you need that level of support, please seek out a qualified provider. Now, let's get started because we know co parenting doesn't come with a playbook, but together, we can certainly figure out how to play the game. Your co parenting game plan starts now. To all the dads who are out there listening, I want to wish you a happy Father's Day. I took some time off recently because, as we all know, life gets hard. And I want to be honest with you about that because I think it matters for this episode. Being a parent is difficult. I don't care how much you love your kids, how committed you are, how much you've sacrificed, it can be hard. And sometimes the most responsible thing that you can do for yourself and for your children is to step back before you break down. You cannot pour from empty. You cannot show up as your best self when you're running on nothing. I had to practice what I preach, and I'm glad I did because I'm back and I'm clear and I have something to share with you today that wouldn't land the same if I didn't stop. The message I want you to get today is before you try harder to be the father everyone says you should be, get honest about the narrative that was written about you before you ever became a dad. Father's Day is this coming Sunday. And I want to say something that perhaps doesn't get said enough. Now, we all probably know Mother's Day and Father's Day, they're not treated the same. And I don't want to pose it as a complaint or anything like that. It's just a data point. For Mother's Day, we see brunches, flowers, social media tributes, restaurant reservations. And for Father's Day, it might be the cookout, sometimes the afterthought. Or, oh, Father's Day's this Sunday. I've had a conversation about that with the father of my own child about this disparity, about how we celebrate, about how we acknowledge and show up for the two roles. And that conversation opened up something for me that I want to share with you because the way we celebrate a role tells us something about how we value it. And the way we talk about fatherhood in this country, and that can be especially true in co parenting situations at times, tells you a great deal about the narrative that dads are walking into before they become dads. Here's what we might say sometimes about dads that too many of them are not there. And those statistics exist. I'm not going to pretend they don't. But what we don't ask is what pushed them out? Because absence isn't always abandonment. Sometimes absence is defeat. Sometimes absence can be abandonment. Sometimes absence is a man who tried to engage in a dynamic that told him at every turn that he was secondary, that mom was the default, that his role was financial first, emotional second, and optional after that. Now, that's not an excuse. I want to definitely be clear about that. Our children need their fathers, but understanding what drives behavior is not the same as excusing it. If we want different outcomes, we have to be willing to ask harder questions about what we're actually looking at when we see an absent dad. We're going to do our Cameron example today to illustrate this point. And remember, these examples are fictional characters. Cameron came into my office frustrated, not angry in the way people expect, not loud, not aggressive, just frustrated in a quiet way that comes from trying and feeling like what he does never counts. Cameron's been showing up to school events, pickups, hard conversations, and still in the narrative being written around him and the dynamic with his co parent and the way certain decisions were being made, Cameron kept finding himself positioned as the secondary parent, the backup, the one whose input was optional. And I watched something happen to Cameron over that time that I see in a lot of dads. He started to pull back, not because he stopped caring, because repeated defeat will do that. Because when the system, the conflict, the messaging all keep telling you that you are less than, at some point, a person can start to believe it. And that's what I call inherited defeat. And it is one of the most undernamed psychological patterns in parenting and definitely in co parenting dynamics as well. So here's the reframe I want you to sit with today. Some dads may be absent because they chose to leave. And yes, that is something that we definitely need to name and hold accountable. But some dads are absent because they were defeated out of the room by a system that wasn't built for them, by a co parenting dynamic that made presence feel impossible, by a narrative that had already been decided who they were before they became dads. And some dads, and I say this as someone who has done her own work around this, some dads are absent due to a story being told about them by a co parent who is carrying wounds that have nothing to do with who that man actually is. Let me elaborate on that because I've lived a version of this. My father was not there for me in my life the way I wanted and needed him to be. And that shaped me. It shaped what I expected. It shaped what I feared. And if I'm being fully honest, it shaped of what I projected onto my own child's father. Expectations built from my own experience of absence, not necessarily from his actual behavior or actual capacity. And I think a lot of co parents, maybe us mothers especially, are operating from a version of projection without having named it or questioned it. And the story that you might be telling yourself about the dad in front of you, ask yourself when that story started, because it may have started long before he came into the picture. I want to name something else specific that sometimes gets thrown around that we don't question because I think it could do real damage. I've heard Happy Father's Day to the mom who is also a dad. Now, I understand the attention behind this. I really do. And it's meant to honor the mother who is carrying more than her share. And that mother, she deserves to be honored. But here's what that phrase can actually do it absolves the absent parent of accountability by reassigning his role to someone else. It suggests that mom can fill what dad left, and she cannot do that. Not because she's not capable, but because being a mother, being an extraordinary mother, does not replace the specific experience of having a father. Those are not the same thing. And pretending they are does not protect the child. It protects the adults from having to sit with the weight of what the child is actually lacking. And most importantly, it erases the child's real experience. That child is not experiencing mom as dad. That child is experiencing the absence of their father. And they need language and space for that, not a reframe that makes adults feel better. So I know that's a hard one. That might hit hard for a lot of people. But I'm going to challenge you to retire that phrase. Honor mom. Honor that extraordinary mom. Give her credit for all the things that she is doing. But also make room for the child to feel what they actually feel. Now, I want to go back to a term I mentioned earlier called inherited defeat, which is when dad is viewed as a secondary parent before even becoming a parent. And so, if you feel that way when you become a father, what do you actually do with that? If you hear in yourself what I just described, inherited defeat, if that's something that has become the water you're swimming in, here's where you can start and name it. You can't fight something you haven't identified. Inherited defeat is not a character flaw, it's a psychological response to repeated messages from the system, from conflict, from your own history that told you your presence didn't matter. Before you try harder to show up differently, you have to be honest about what you've been carrying and where it came from. Is this defeat from co parenting, from how you were fathered, from a system that keeps moving the goalposts? Name that source because what you name, you can begin to work on that. Separate the narrative from the truth. The narrative says dads who aren't there don't care. The truth is more complicated than that, I think. And the narrative you've internalized about yourself as a father, as a co parent, as a man in this situation may have more to do with what you've been told than with who you actually are. Where you are right now in your child's life, it's not a verdict on who you are as a father, it's a starting point. Separate what you've been told from what is actually true and build from there. Take one step back into the room. Not 10 steps, just one. Inherited defeat can convince you that the distance is too far, that too much time has passed, that the damage is done. It is rarely as final as that feels. One consistent, reliable, low drama action, a phone call you make every week, a pickup you commit to and keep, a text that says, I'm thinking about you, can start to rebuild what defeat dismantled. Your kids are watching for consistency, not perfection. Give them something they can count on and build from there. Get honest about what co parenting conflict is costing your kids. This one can be quite hard because when conflict is high, when the dynamic is exhausting, when the system feels stacked against you, it's easy to tell yourself that stepping back protects your kids from the chaos. It doesn't. It just changes what they're losing, what they're experiencing. Co parenting and conflict is very real, and navigating it takes strategy. But pulling out of your child's life because the adult dynamic is hard is a decision your child will carry long after the conflict is resolved. Get support, get strategy, but take a step back in the room. Decide who you are independent of who they, quote unquote, say you are. And this can be another tough one. Sometimes in high conflict co parenting situations, a father's identity can become almost entirely defined by the narrative the other parent is putting forward to the courts, to the kids, to the family. And when you spend enough time fighting that narrative, you can lose track of who you actually are outside of it. Your identity as a father does not belong to that conflict. Decide who you are, ground yourself in that, and parent from that place, not from the defense. Now, for the dads who are showing up, I see you. The school pickups, the hard conversations, the moments where you stayed even when it would have been easier to go. That matters. Your kids feel it, even when nobody says so. Keep doing that. And to the dads who have pulled back, who have let inherited defeat convince you that it's too late, that you've already lost, that the system has decided and there's nothing left to do, I want you to hear this. It's not too late. But staying defeated is a choice you are making right now. And your kids are the ones who are experience the repercussions of that choice. And before you try harder to fight the narrative, get honest about whether you've started to believe it yourself. Because in my work, I like to get clear about positioning and where you are positioned in your child's life. It's not fixed, it's not permanent. Relational positioning can shift, but it requires you to decide that you are worth the shift, that your kids are worth the shift. You are, and they are too. Co parenting conflict, it's real. The system's bias, also real. The weight of everything you're carrying right now is real as well. And none of that changes the fact that your presence, imperfect, complicated, still figuring it out presence, is irreplaceable to your child. Show up, keep showing up, not because it's easy, but because they need you to. Again, happy Father's Day to every dad that listened to this. Happy Father's Day to the ones who are tired, to the ones who are proud, to the ones who are trying to figure out how to do this better, to the ones who know they haven't shown up the way they wanted to and are sitting with that today. Today is a good day to decide something different. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs it and subscribe so you never miss a practical tool that can actually change the trajectory of your life. If you're ready to explore some of the relational proximity things that I spoke about today, about your positioning, about how that can change, I put the link for what I call the proximity audit in the show notes. It'll show you exactly where you stand. But if you've been here and you've listened long enough to know that what you need isn't just another resource, but a real conversation, the link to work with me is in the show notes as well. Next time, I'll be back with more tips and tools to help you show up as a true co parenting champion. Because we know co parenting doesn't come with a playbook, but together, we can certainly figure out how to play the game. Your co parenting game plan starts now.